watched Gladiator.
Oh.
I might think of you as the Russell Crowe of the Academy. That's absolutely wonderful. You mentioned a few times that we may be looking at spaces whose function is opened up to a wider public. Is that still a relatively privileged public? Is this perhaps citizens, not your lowest slave or your lowliest artisan? Is there any way of refining that a little?
We don't know is the short answer, because there is no direct evidence for the usership of these buildings or people talking about access arrangements or readers' tickets or anything of the sort. There are snippets of evidence. The Ephesian Library, for example, has the marks of heavy doors opening and shutting on the threshold. So you could shut it off, but quite often the doors were open. So walking past, you could see the inside. And I wonder, at what point is somebody a library user, right? We tend to think of this, the person that goes in, takes a book from the shelf, reads it, is obviously a library user, or experiences the library directly. If you walk past outside and think, gosh, what a grand building, and glimpse the books through the doorway, are you using the library? Well, not in the same sense, but you are experiencing it as a monument. And I think sometimes, a bit provocatively, about spaces like the British Library or the Western Library in Oxford that have gift shops and cafes and public piazzas and events and jazz in the evenings. Are the people that go to those things library users? It's the library kind of presenting itself to the public in a deliberate way. So probably not the lowest of the lowest of the low, but everybody in Ephesus would walk past the Celtus Library pretty much every day and would see it and be impressed by it.
So this is not just an extremely exclusive circle like Lucullus and his mates or Cicero and his friends.
If it was that, and those private coteries, they still exist, they're still important. There are private library patrons like Laurentius for Athenaeus or Stella for Martial, who really are important patrons of the arts inside their private villas with their fancy dinner parties. That still goes on. But that's not what these buildings are doing. If these were just for private cliques, they needn't be on the most expensive land in the city, addressing public piazzas with enormous billboard facades. That seems that they're trying to, even if the people inside are the same 25 local aristocrats who go to the dinner parties, the people outside are being addressed by this.
May I offer one more observation?
Please do go ahead.
Thank you very much. When I was listening to Francesca, I was thinking to myself to start with, but surely Callimachus and Aristophanes are still the literate gatekeepers. And then I thought, well, but presumably Aristophanes and Callimachus actually had patrons. And perhaps what these patrons are trying to do is appropriate what is a common good among the folk through the mediation of a literary client, stamp it with their own patronal honour and give it back to the people. I don't know whether that rings true or not, but then I started to think, well, maybe a similar thing is being done in these spaces, these architectural spaces, because if it's not just a place for book storage, and in fact book storage is perhaps, 5% or 10%, but you've also got statuary, art, and displays of gladiators and whatever, then the bookishness of it is only part of a patron saying, I take this common good, which is popular among you plebs, and I give it back to you with my own glorious stamp on it. So maybe a similar thing is going on. That's a suggestion, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think these things don't have a value as a display tactic unless there's an audience that's receptive to it. So what Celtus is doing in Ephesus is boasting in a way that seems almost ridiculous to us of his literary credentials, right? The statues across the front of his understanding and wisdom, and the long inscriptions about how wonderful he is, and they're putting a garland on his statue every time it's his birthday. But he really wants to be noticed. He's really trying to get as many people as possible to remember him and think about him in this context of learnedness. And it's a qualification for elite civic office. And in this age and in this place, you've got to be able to be an efficient rhetor, you've got to be able to speak, you've got to be learned. So it's a political, embedded cultural status boast as well. But there'd be not much point trying to make that boast in that way unless it was something that people were receptive to and that there was an appetite for, I think. Not quite so publicly.
I have, okay, I'm a little bit concerned about the bulky tables that have been put into library. I know this is a problem instead because there's rivets and there's no traces of tables. And those tables, I mean, comparing to the rest of Roman and Greek furniture as well, they're the size of craftsmen's tables. Yeah. And for them to be inside the library and with the chairs tucked under them just seems, I mean.
Thank you for noticing the tables. There are two sets of tables in here. These are Jim Packer's tables. These just look hopelessly modern to me. Right. Oh, sorry. Oh, God, God, I didn't know you were looking at that. That's my children outside an ice cream shop in San Francisco. I'm sorry. They're top left. Those are Packer's tables, which I partly copied in my Trajanic reconstruction in my callow youth, and I might now go and reconsider. That looks to me, it's a beautiful piece of technical reconstruction, but the tables and the chairs look so modern. So are there any attestations of people reading and writing at horizontal surfaces in the ancient world? Not very many. There's a relief from Ostia that shows people sitting at tables scribing. Oh, okay, good. So there is some, and people like Small and others talk about people reading with the scroll on their knee or holding it up. We know about cathedra-style chairs and cross-leg stools, but the tables bother me, and you'll see in my Ephesus reconstruction I haven't put in.
Yeah, I'm glad that they bother you as well, yeah, because it just makes more sense with what you're saying about these places as social spaces, and for the flexibility of this place, it just boggles my mind that Trajan's library, people still, why?
Because those marble tables would weigh half a ton each. You can't move them around. So I think they're probably wrong, and I'm glad you noticed it, and I apologise for them being in the slides, but where we do have to think about furniture is with people like Galen, who make it abundantly clear that they spent days and days reading and writing texts and doing it in a way that involved moving between their notebook and their scroll all the time. And we might conventionally say, oh, well, they had slave scribes and they did it all by dictation. But then Galen says, I put in the full stops with my own hand. He's pretty explicit about it. There has to be some kind of writing surface somewhere. These enormous marble tables, I think, are a bit silly, and I'm glad you flag it. But I think we do need to think about what the furniture in these spaces might have been like, and we're really prisoners of the fact there's almost no evidence. But you know the relief from Ostia. There are some pictures of the apparatus of reading and writing. It'll come back. Did I put this in my slides? There's a famous relief that often gets used. Yeah, here it is. Of a sort of schoolroom scene there. So these high-backed chairs and people holding scrolls and carrying scrolls about. So seating and reading is fine. Seating and tables and reading is a bit more of a leap.
Thank you so much for your lecture. I think that you have to give this lecture everywhere in the country and outside to librarians who are looking for new things in their thinking about what we do with libraries nowadays. So President Reagan started a library. I'm not so sure that Trump will start a library. So it's fascinating to see how these libraries are also monuments for a new lifestyle and for thinking. But that's not a question. It's only a compliment. That's what you say about the relation between only 5% of book storage and the rest of the public space. Doesn't say anything about the relation between orality and literacy, because they give more space to what's happening, and for instance to reading and interaction, than for storage of books.
I think it implies that the libraries, there are various reasons for putting the books in, if we believe they're in recessed masonry cupboards in the wall. It's partly to keep the floor area free for other kinds of activity, including oral performance or lectures, debate. There's also a security measure in it that where we have an understanding of how libraries function, it seems to be that there are sometimes library attendants who go and get the books. And the librarian designers are trying to put a distance between the person in the library and the books because the books are expensive, which I think is another indirect argument for there being a kind of mixed public audience in here. Your question, how low down the scale do we go? How public were these spaces? If you have to try and keep the books semi-hidden away, it might suggest that there's a kind of people coming and going a lot. So there's a security argument, but I think also they're pushing them out to leave these floor areas free, which then mean why fill them with heavy tables? And why would you keep a large area of floor space free in order that you could put lots of people in it for some kind of event, I suspect? Yeah. Yeah. And we do know, Senate meetings in libraries, Apuleius and other people talk about literary events in libraries. Pollio, as well as building Rome's first public library, was supposed to have instituted public recitations of literary works. There's this. Yes, yeah. So we might imagine books are given their sort of ectasis, their first reading, maybe in a patron's villa, but maybe also in a library space.